This is a quick start guide, an overview to the JetNet Gradebook. So in your course shell, you can access your gradebook by clicking here on the three-line menu and then clicking on Grades. Or you can click on the Course Management and then click on Gradebook. Once you're in the gradebook, I want to point out there are two levels of menu here. Very important to know that this top menu stays the same. These options are always going to be there. This level of menu changes depending on which of these options you choose in the top level menu. Real quickly, I'd like to point out which of these menus are actually useful to you. That way you can ignore the ones that aren't. So, Grade or Report is the default view. You're going to come here quite frequently. Here's where you can enter grades, you can look at grades, you can interact with grades and keep track of the entire class. As you know, you're required to post grades to the JetNet Gradebook on a weekly basis, except for in the case of very large projects like term papers and course projects and things like that, which is understood requires more grading time. But typically you want to be posting grades on a weekly basis to communicate to students how they're doing. In the menus, you're going to use View Menu, Grade or Report, as I mentioned. You're also going to use Single View. Single View is very useful for selecting a specific grade item so that you can enter grades for all students on that grade item. For example, you give an in-class quiz, you've got those papers sitting in front of you, you've got them graded, now you want to enter the grades. It's much easier to isolate your gradebook view to a single view, just that quiz, so you can enter those grades rapidly. User Report is very useful when you're having a conference with a student. You can choose a specific student and then you will see just their grades. You would never want to use the Grader Report to show a student their grades because then they could see all student grades. So again, in the view, you're going to use Grader Report, Single View, and User Report. Next, Setup, as the name tells. You use Setup in order to create your gradebook. Your gradebook is made up of grade items and categories. For now, ignore outcome items. A grade item is that thing into which you put a numeric grade. That is the only thing you can put a grade into is a grade item. You can create categories and group grade items together for the purposes of weighting by category. For example, your syllabus might call for quizzes and exams to be 60% of the course grade. You can put all of those quizzes and exams in a single category and then weight that category 60% of all grades, and that calculation is done for you. The other reason for creating categories is just logical grouping. You may want to group all quizzes together and all papers together and all presentations together because it's easier to keep track of them that way. Your choice. All right, now let's take a look at in the additional menus. The only other one that you might use is Export. Export is recommended to choose Excel spreadsheet and download at the end of the term. I recommend you do this so that you have an accessible version of your gradebook available to you for 3 to 5 years, however long you like to keep it, long after you no longer have access to the course itself. So again, View, Setup, Export, those are really the only three menus you'll use there. And of those menus, in the View, you'll use Grader Report, you'll use Single View, and User Report. In the Setup, you're going to use the gradebook setup. You really don't use these others. And then in the Export, you will use Excel spreadsheet. It's the most common subcategory or submenu you use there. All right, now, setting up a gradebook, we have a quick start guide specific to setting up gradebooks for point-based or percentage-based systems. Let me just go through a little bit of information that will help you maybe understand this. So as you enter a gradebook, you're going to have just this root category. Only one category. You can put all of your grade items in there. A grade item can be added manually here, or you can add a grade item back in your course by turning the editing on and then choosing Add Activity or Resource. And then you can choose an assignment type or a forum or a quiz, for example, and you can have those activity types create grade items in your gradebook for you. Going back to the gradebook and back to setup. So right now, in the default, you don't have any grade items and you only have this one category. From the start, you need to consult your grading system to understand whether or not you're using a percentage-based or a points-based grading system. Like I said, we have a Quickstart guide for each of those. But how do you know the difference? Well, right here in the top menu, right here, edit settings for your JetNet grading training course, that's the root level. You can see that the default aggregation method is simple weighted mean of grades. Anything that has the word mean in it is going to be a percentage-based system. So you have weighted mean of grades and simple weighted mean of grades, and then you've got mean of grades with extra credits. If you wanted to have a points-based system, you would use natural. Those are your really only choices there. Exclude empty grades is useful to know about because it does affect how your grades are displayed to students. The default is to have empty grades excluded. What this means is that empty grades, grades that no number or zeros have been inputted into, are not calculated in the total points for the class or the total grade for the class. You can think of this as a running total. Some instructors prefer this. In fact, most instructors prefer this because they want their student to look at their grades weekly and see how they're doing. They don't want the student to look at their grade book weekly and think that they're flunking and don't have any chance of passing. So the grades are calculated based only on those grades which actually have come due and have been inputted. It's important to make sure that in such a grading system you input zeros for students who don't turn in assignments. Now, if you turn this off by unclicking the checkbox, this means that all grades count against the student's final grade from the moment that this box is unchecked. You could think of this as an instructor wants to explain to the students, look, especially like in a points-based system, you start off with no points, but every assignment you do, you earn points. So constantly be trying to earn points. Get that number as big as possible. That's the reasoning or the thinking behind that. As I said, the default is here. You also have this show more. There are some situations where a syllabus or a grading system calls for dropping the lowest grade, like the lowest quiz or the lowest exam. You can do that right here by just inputting the number, drop the lowest 1 or 2 or however many you want to. All right, so that's quickly a little bit about the gradebook. The JetNet Gradebook is fairly simple to use. I hope that you are able to get started using it. We offer training on this, both online and face-to-face. If you have any specific questions or problems, always feel free to contact.